I'm curious, how many of us have ever volunteered in the nursery, or maybe we've gone to pick up a sibling or something like that, or even just walked through the church and passed by the nursery and we've seen that mural on the wall. It's Noah's Ark, right? We've seen it and it's great, right? It's perfect. It's the perfect thing to put in a nursery. It's like a floating zoo. And the pastor loves it too because it's a biblical story, right? So it's a win-win, right? There's animals on the ark. There's hippos, giraffes, monkeys, elephants, birds. They're all sorts of colors. The giraffe is spotted, the elephant is purple, the hippo is blue. And they're all in pairs. None of them are alone. They all have a friend, right? And there's an obvious masculine and feminine one, right? It's great. And then we have Noah on the ark. He's bigger than life. Literally, the proportions are all off. Noah's like the size of the elephant, and if he was to lay down, he would take up the entire ark. And the sun is out. All of us are happy that the sun is out here in Seattle, but the sun is out over the ark, and Noah's happy because he's safe from the flood. This is oftentimes the way we read the story of Noah's Ark. We read it that he is safe from the flood and he's escaped death. The biblical story is much greater, though. It's a story of work. You see, Noah starts and he's on the earth and God tells him to build an ark. Those of us who have ever worked with wood all know that working with wood is difficult. It's challenging and it can be tedious. And to build a vessel that would keep out water would have been incredibly difficult, and it would have taken a lot of precision and accuracy. And the ark was bigger than our home. This would have taken a long time. It would have been hard work. Also, he was working with animals. For anyone who's ever had to go chase after their dog or an animal, we know that can be a challenge. But God told Noah to gather all the animals, 2 of every single one. I can't imagine how an old man would have gotten all the animals and the birds and everything. And anyone who's ever worked in a farm or with any other animals, they know that they smell bad, they're stinky, they're a lot of work, they get sick. This is not fun work to do. He was also told to gather food for all the animals and for his family during the flood. But you see, the story goes further than that. It's also a story about death. Many people died. Many loved ones, people who Noah was close to. I imagine he had family who weren't invited onto the ark. And he had his sons, his wife, and his sons' wives who had loved ones and family who weren't allowed onto the ark. I can just imagine the tragedy that took place. As the water began to rise and the rain began to fall, people would have all flocked to the ark looking for salvation from the flood. People would have died, young, old, infants, children, parents and grandparents, all looking to be saved from the flood. The water would continue to rise, and the ark would start to float. The people would start to try to swim, but there would be no salvation for them. Their cries would slowly be silenced by death. And the ark would sit there, floating among all the dead bodies. No, this isn't a children's story at all, is it? But it's also a story about God. We see God grieve. He's saddened by the people's sin because they're disobedient to him. They don't listen to him, and they are continuing to sin on earth, and he's sad. We see that God is a God of justice and grace. Justice in that the people were punished for their sin, and grace because he chose to save Noah. But the part that we want to focus on today is God is faithful. Now let's rewind back a bit through the story. Throughout the story, we see Noah waiting on God, and God is always faithful. The first time we see this is when Noah is waiting for the flood to happen. You see, God gives Noah instructions to prepare for the flood. He's to build the ark, gather the animals, gather the food, and Noah does it. And he trusts that God has a plan. And sure enough, God is faithful. He comes through and he brings the flood like he said he would. Noah's work is not in vain, and we see that Noah was obedient to God. And this is the first time God is faithful. The second time we see Noah waiting on God is during the flood. It's actually interesting. Throughout the account of the flood, Noah never says a word. In fact, it isn't until the flood is over, when he curses Ham, that we see Noah first speak. But you see, Noah had to have had thoughts and emotions that we don't read in the Bible. All of us humans know that we have experienced difficulties and trials, and we question God. And I imagine Noah too questioned God in this time of the flood. All of us have been on car trips, I'm sure, and we've all asked the question, yeah, we know it, when we're tired of driving and when we're ready to get out of the car, are we there yet? It's a familiar question to us that we've all heard, and I'm sure Noah, in the midst of the flood, was asking God this question. Are we there yet? When is this flood going to end? When am I going to be out of this ark and away from these animals? I have been faithful to you. I have been obedient to what you have told me, God. And why am I still here? It's been over half a year, and I'm still in this ark. How much longer must I do this? We've all had floods in our own life. Maybe it's financial difficulties, or maybe we're praying for family, who's not with God, and we're praying for God to show himself in their lives. Or maybe it's with sickness or any ailment in our own health or our family's health, and we're praying for God to heal them. Or maybe it's in our ministry, and we're asking God to reveal himself in our ministry and show up and do a mighty work through our ministry. And we're asking God, are we there yet? How much longer, God, will we persist in not seeing you and not hearing from you, God? It feels like God has forgotten us. It feels like we're alone and that he is not with us in the midst of our own floods. There's that story. Actually, when I was in 8th grade, my mom forgot me. My siblings and I have a twin sister and a brother, and we were getting shots, and I'm the youngest one, so of course I trailed in the back as we're walking out of the clinic, and my brother actually had his learner's permit, and he was arguing with my mom. He wanted to drive home, and my mom was just ready to get home, and so he was arguing with her on wanting to drive home, and while we were walking out, I don't know what happened, but I passed out. And my mom was so distracted that no one noticed I fell. And so my mom, my sister, my brother all left the clinic without even noticing I was gone. They got to the car and my mom noticed I was missing, and she realized she had forgotten. Now, she came back, got me, everything was good, but she was distracted, you see, and she forgot and didn't even realize I was gone. Sometimes this is what it feels like when God isn't there. It feels like God has forgotten us. He's distracted and has forgotten us in the midst of our floods. And I'm sure this is how Noah felt. I'm sure Noah felt like God had abandoned him during the flood. But in chapter 8 it says, "But God remembered Noah and all the beasts and all the livestock that were with him in the ark. And God made the wind blow over the earth, and the water subsided." God remembered Noah. Now, I don't think this is because God forgot Noah, or he was distracted and forgot that he had a plan, but I think it's that God remembered that there was a plan to save Noah. He was faithful and remembered Noah, and the flood subsided. The third time we see Noah waiting on God is at the end. When the flood is subsiding, going away, we see that Noah is waiting on God to carry away the rest of the flood. This took time. Genesis goes on to say, "And the fountains of the deep and the windows of the heavens were closed. The rain from the heavens was restrained, and the waters receded from the earth continually. At the end of 150 days, the water had abated in the 7th month, and on the 17th day of the month, the ark came to rest on the mountains of Ararat. And the waters continued to abate until the 10th month, and the 10th month, on the first day of the month, the top of the mountains were seen." This took a long time. After God finally carried away the flood and said it was over, it still took time. It didn't happen immediately. It didn't happen overnight. It took months for this to happen. And I'm sure, again, Noah kept asking the question, are we there yet? When will this end, God? Haven't I seen enough trials? Haven't I experienced enough difficulties and hardships? But finally, after waiting months and months, the flood went away. But before it actually went away, you see Noah sending out birds looking for land. The first time, he sends out a raven. The raven goes out and collects to collect something, but he sees nothing. The raven returns, not finding any land, not landing anywhere, but coming back to the ark for rest and to land. There was no land. So again, Noah sends out a dove. 7 days later, wondering if there's land anywhere. The dove again returns, having nothing, finding no land. A third time, Noah sends out the dove, and finally the dove returns with this glimpse of hope. Comes with an olive branch. Land was coming. And one final time, he sends out the dove, and the dove leaves and never comes back. it had found land to rest on. And finally, the dove found land. You see, Noah was still left on the ark, and it took time still for him to get off the ark. He waited until God told him to get off the ark. And finally, he gets off the ark, and God makes his covenant with Noah. This is how it feels in life too sometimes. When we're in the midst of our floods and trials of life, we wonder, God, why is this taking so long? You've given us your word, God. We're waiting on you to do something. We're waiting on you to carry out the call in our life that you've called us to, God. We've been obedient to you. We're following you, God. And we're faithful to what you're doing. Why are we still in this flood, even after you said it's over? This takes time in our life. It can take a long, long time. And we question, is God really faithful? Is he there when we're struggling? Is he there when we feel alone? These questions fill our lives daily, through financial difficulties, through health. But God is always faithful. He is always there when we feel alone. There's never a time when he isn't there, even when it seems like we're alone. It's actually funny. This weekend, me and my girlfriend, we went to Seattle and we took public transportation. We always know public transportation is reliable, right? Well, it wasn't this time for us. It was a good day, everything went well, and we were on our way back. It was getting cold, starting to get dark, and we decided time to go home. And so we went to the bus tunnel to try to get back, and the bus tunnel was closed. So of course we're like, okay, well there's another entrance on the other side. So we tried and we went to the bus tunnel, and we figured, hey, we'll get back home to the other side. But then again, it was closed. So we're like, okay, we don't know what to do. We don't know how to get home. So we looked around and we saw a sign that said when the bus tunnel was closed to go to 4th Avenue and Pike Street. There the bus would come to pick us up. So we went to 4th and Pike and we went to wait for the bus, but there was nothing that indicated that the bus would ever come. We waited and waited. We looked at the sign showed all the other buses that would come, and all the other buses did come, but not the bus for Kirkland. So we panicked. We left thinking, maybe the sign was wrong, or maybe we misread it. And so we kept looking around at the other bus stops around the blocks, and there was nothing that indicated that the Kirkland bus would ever come for us. So we kept going, looking. After finding nothing, we figured, maybe we misread the sign. So we went back and returned to the tunnel to find we were right. It was at Pikes and 4th Street. We read it correctly, but it wasn't there. So we went back and looked again at Pike and 4th Street, and there was nothing. No bus for Kirkland. So then we went back again to look for help. And we found a guy wearing a vest, and we asked him, we were like, you know, you look like you know a thing or two. You're wearing your official yellow vest. And we asked, when is the bus to Kirkland going to come by, and where does it come to pick us up, because we're trying to get back? And that was humbling for me. I mean, having to ask as a guy for directions was not easy, but I did it. And the guy told us, sure enough, go to 4th and Pike. So we went back and we waited and we waited and we waited. It was getting cold. We began to lose hope, but the bus finally came. You see, if we would have just listened to the sign in the first place and waited, the bus would have came, and we wouldn't have been in this panic and a frenzy like we were. This is how God works a lot of times. We wait and wait on God, and we begin to lose trust that God is ever going to do what he says he will do. But God is faithful. In the popularized Lord of the Rings, we see Gandalf say this time and time again. He says, "A wizard is never late, nor is he early. He arrives precisely when he means to." This is kind of like God. God is never late, nor is he early. He arrives precisely when he means to. Now this isn't perfect, because there are times when Gandalf leaves his party. He leaves them alone, and there is a feeling like they are alone and Gandalf isn't there to protect them. But God isn't this way. God is always there. Even in the midst of our floods and trials, God is there. He is faithful.